we had a few, well, my year, we didn't have many black male kids, but a lot of black females in my year. I think there was about 8 or 9 or so black males in my class. Well, not my class, but within the whole of the actual like 4 sets of groups that we had within our year. I was the only black kid, and I never realised it until I looked at a school photo, and I was the only black male within the whole of my first to fifth year, and it always felt like I was picked on. Don't get me wrong, I'd get in trouble, I'd do certain things, but it always seemed that I would be the pinpointed all the time. And it's not due to the fact of what I did, it's usually my reaction towards what the problem was, which always seemed to get me into trouble in school. But yeah, it's a case of, I just feel that education is a major factor, and it always has been.
That's going to be down to, that's also, education is one thing, but it's down to having the right teachers.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to have the right teachers, and you know, I mean, teachers that are driven to help the kids that they know who are failing, rather than the kids that, you know, that have the capabilities and the aptitude to excel.
But you always put down on the low anyway. You always starting, because when I went to school, I was looked at as dumb. When I was in school, more in primary school more than I was in secondary, just due to the fact I just didn't want to do the work because I found it boring. I found it too easy, and I would want to muck about and, you know, find something else that would take my interest. So I'd always be reading all the time. So I was always no teachers never looked at me until, you know, my mum made a big fuss about it, and, you know, I went through tests and stuff like that. That no, I was actually quite intelligent, you know, and a lot of kids are bracketed in that kind, especially black males, I feel, are bracketed in that troublesome, low intelligence kind of sector, of which definitely is not the case. So not the case at all. But, you know, the school curriculum, I feel, favours, you know, and I'll say it, white middle class kids, because they're learning from usually white middle class teachers who have a certain way of teaching children, of which they've learnt from living in a middle class background, which unfortunately means that a lot of black kids don't get the understanding. And I don't think it's their fault, the teachers. I don't think they're doing it on purpose to victimise, but through all the channeling that we get about the term being black, you're always put on the rung of the ladder, always, and you have to prove yourself, and prove yourself even bigger to even stay on the same level as white middle class kids.
Sorry to interject there, but don't you ever think to yourself sometimes, because we're talking about this stuff, when as you're talking about this stuff, it just keeps coming to my head like,
Yeah.
but this is England. You know, it's England. They they built this country for English people. So having built it for English people, you know, it's like, how are they supposed to know how to deal with black kids and black kids' problems and issues? And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
What I mean is, if for some reason we're not getting our history because they've not included it, because they want to paint themselves as the victors of everything, and the, you know, the do-gooders and everything else, which is, we know
they want to skip through history.
History is history.
They want to skip through history, a lot of the teachers, and not
teach
you on certain subjects.
But the fact that what I'm trying to say is, they clearly, in that case, they skip through history. It means that they basically whitewashed history, because it was all about presenting them as you know, as being, well, you guys think of the word yourselves. You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I know.
So the point is, if you know, you look from that perspective, you're like, okay, well, this is England. They have built this country for English people. Clearly, there's going to be an issue when they're trying to help young black kids. So sometimes it's down to us understanding that simple thing. Okay, this is country's looking out for itself. How are we going to, you know, educate them?
So what are you saying? You're saying,
how are we going to educate them to recognise how important it is for us to understand?
Yeah, but what you're saying is conformity?
No, not us conforming. It's about us trying to make them understand that there are certain things that we need. Is it possible for us to make them understand what we need?
The only way that's going to happen is if we have more people who, more teachers as headmasters who are in the black community, more black people within the higher echelons of the educational system changing that. That's the only way that's actually going to happen. But unfortunately, what happens is that they either conform to the white narrative, or they're just not there in position anyway. So we're going to carry on going in circles and circles and circles.
But we have to have that fight, and when I say it's a fight, because when we think about the book that Leo Logan wrote, and he talks about his story and how he literally fought his way up through the police, for the ranks, and the police closing ranks, that book's called. And he fought his way through the system, or whatever it may be, to be able to be in a situation where he now is educating the police force.
But it's always, we have to go through the struggle.
And it takes decades.
We have to go through the struggle, and that's not saying that white people don't have to go through the struggle, because everybody has to in any kind of subject or anything that you do in life, but their struggles on a different plane. Their struggles.
So are you saying this was inevitable?
Well, it's inevitable anyway. It's inevitable for black kids and the black community. We have to go through the struggle of being accepted. We have to be accepted, or we have to maybe, I don't know, compromise maybe to be actually looked at as equal, or we have to exceed just to be on the same equal ladder. And that's the issue that we have a lot with the terms black and white, which we'll talk about later. But it's not on an equal footing, and regardless in whatever sport, whatever kind of job that you take, you're always fighting just to be accepted. Not as good as you are, not your skill level or however, but just to be accepted first and foremost. And that's the issue that we have.
It always comes back to me when we talk about race and we talk about some of the issues. Obviously, I know it's not straightforward as saying that, things people are to blame for what's gone on. It's not straightforward as saying that. But for me, it's always going to come down to this whole thing where, understanding. We have to understand each other better. I spoke to somebody, a guy who said he didn't blame it on the economic situation. He didn't blame it on lack of education. He just said, look, this is a black guy said to me, look, Mark Anthony, my view is this, we could have done better. We basically let down the other generations. That was his view. He was in gangs. He said, look, I could have just not got in gangs. I could have just been a very different person. And he goes, but I chose to get in a gang, and I chose to go around robbing, and I chose to be, not to be the kind of role model I should have been. And because of that, I influenced so many other people. And that's someone from the generation, he's probably, he's about 58, 60 years old. And he was like one of the first generations of black people here. And he goes, he takes a portion of that blame. And as a result of that, he wants to do whatever he can to make.
Well, we do have to take blame within our community. I agree on that certain element, definitely. But once again, I understand the reasons why we are so easily, we easily put ourselves in that position and actually derogatize ourselves, because we're so much channeled into black is a certain narrative that we fall into it anyway. We fall into the aggressive, the kind of egotistical, the what's the word I'm looking for?
You fall into the trap, basically.
Yeah, we just fall into the trap.
Into the narrative.
And it's easier. And it's easy to fall into the trap than rise above it.
Or the stereotype.
Yeah, and it's easy for us to do.
The police officer thinks you're a criminal, so you're like, well.
So you play the criminal.
And that's got to change. I mean, again, I think the biggest word that we can take from this, the most apt word, is education.
It's
only explaining to people where their future lies if they take these paths, what options they have, but by teaching them these things and giving them better understanding of the history and so forth, and I'm giving them the pride, because if you're an English person, you've got pride. Whatever it is, whether it's false pride or whatever, because of what's happened or whatever, it's still pride.
Yeah,
it's almost pride. They won the Second World War, the First World War. There's a lot of great things there. But if you, like you said, if you're a black person, your history's you've been told that you actually weren't in the war, you had no contribution to it. By all means, you're going to be quite lost.
You only came here as slaves.
Of course. Absolutely.
That's defeatist in every mark there is. It's like, how can I explain it? It's like you're always fighting all the time just to get approval, or you're always resistant. You're resisting the narrative. You know, yeah, it's hard. It's a hard one in regards to actually defining who you are as a person, because I'll say it now, there's no equality between black and white. And what I mean by that is that if you look at the colours system of black and white, white's always looked as positive, black is always looked as degrading. That's just a fact.
Well,
So
we'll have a conversation about
that's the issue. Yeah, we'll talk about that. But
thank you, thank you so much again. Once again, your input is invaluable. You know, we appreciate it, and we're looking forward to people coming forward and you know, putting some of their questions to us again, and just continue this conversation. It's very important that people, we as a people, wherever, as a race, a human race, find solutions so that we can move forward and have a better future.
Yeah.
Thank you, buddy.